Hello, my name is Lucy Roberts, and I spent this summer studying with a UO Cure Fire Fellowship, quantifying glacial melt and movement using remote sensing in Greenland's Sermilik Fjord. So I was working with Dr. Dave Sutherland and Nicole Abib of the UO Department of Earth Sciences, and Dr. Sutherland has been going out periodically to various fjords in Greenland over the last 8 years and distributing GPS units on icebergs as they move through the fjord. This has allowed for the lab to get GPS data that allows for them to track how icebergs distribute fresh water and move through the currents that are in these fjords in Greenland. And so as global climate change leads to a warming of polar regions and recession of glacial bodies, fresh water from icebergs and glacial discharge get mixed in with salty ocean water. As such, it's important to be able to understand and quantify how icebergs melt and where that fresh water gets distributed. And so my fellowship with FIRE initially began with exploring how the iceberg data was structured and being able to visualize and compare how those icebergs varied interannually. And so graphics such as graphic B gave a better understanding of the data structure, but also allowed for a visual comparison of how these icebergs differed. From this, we decided that we wanted to add remote sensing into our repertoire of data that we had about each of the icebergs, because it would allow for quantification of how much each of our icebergs melted throughout the period that we were tracking them for. So the second half of my fellowship, I spent developing a workflow to use satellite imagery from Landsat and Sentinel to load it into this program called QGIS and color rectify the image. From this allows for differences in things like sunlight or cloud cover to be minimized and allowed for us to then trace out the perimeters of the icebergs as they moved through the fjord. As a result of this fellowship, I was able to develop a workflow for identifying remotely sensed icebergs connected to GPS units. I began to populate a spreadsheet with preliminary data on surface area and quantified and visualized interannual differences between GPS data. My research, unfortunately, was cut shorter in the summer because I am from Southern Oregon and was directly in the area where several towns were at risk of burning down because of the forest fires. So it's my hope to continue to work with wrapping up this project over the next summer. Other future directions that this research could take include integrating other satellite imagery, so from other satellite programs, and potentially using their research grants to create a finer temporal scale. As of now, we can generally get 1 to 3 images per iceberg throughout the course of their journey, and integrating other satellite imagery might allow us to have more of that data. And finally, applying this workflow to other fjords in Greenland. So for example, Dr. Sutherland has been tracking icebergs in fjords such as Jakobshavn in Western Greenland. And so applying this type of analysis to other regions could allow for a better quantification of how this spatial distribution changes depending on the region in Greenland. I would personally just like to thank the UO Center for Undergraduate Research for providing me with a FIRE fellowship and the opportunity to work on this throughout the summer, Kristen Schild for providing extra pictures and helping us along the way, and the funding for the GPS units came from the NSF and University of Oregon grants.